So I feel like we get into this place where we fear the change. We don't want to step outside of this comfort zone, even though we're suffering, because it's familiar, and the unfamiliar is scary. And so I let this fear keep me stuck in this place until I had my low point moment, which was the night where I was finished a binge and I always threw the food in the garbage because I thought if I throw it in the garbage, I'm not going to go and dig through the garbage and eat it. But that night I did.
When was the last time you said a kind word to yourself? Think about it for a moment. Since you're part of the Holistically Speaking Thrive Hive, I know the kind of person you are. I know that you are compassionate and kind. You're empathetic and you care about what other people feel, right? Except sometimes you forget about the most important person in your life. And then those thoughts and those feelings and those actions creep in, and before you know it, you are putting yourself down. It doesn't feel good, does it? Guess what? You're not alone. I've been there. In fact, I was there recently when the last couple of weeks I didn't put out an episode because I have been on overwhelm, right? I was in Dublin, Ireland, presenting at the Global Havening Conference, and that kept me busy. And then right from there, I went to Texas, and I was doing a story for Healthy Communities for CBS Health. And then I bounced back, and I was presenting as one of the speakers at She Podcast Live. Did you attend? I hope you were there. So I've been very busy, and I guess you can say I had a lot on the plate, but I felt bad. I felt like I was letting you down. And then I started that inner dialogue with myself. And I realized that I was not saying kind words to myself. But then I had that switch, that sometimes you have to say no to others to say yes to yourself. And I say that to my clients a lot. So why am I not telling myself that, right? We let it get ahead of ourselves every once in a while. And I have to catch myself before I go down that pity party table of one road. And when it comes to body image, man, I was a kid that struggled with that too. And it was my weight, and it was how I looked at myself. And every time I looked in the mirror, I saw something different. And there are times where, even as an adult, I see the little kid in me, right? And if you've been part of this podcast for a while, you know that I share the story about going to fat camp. Yeah, I went to fat camp. We called it that. And that wasn't a good thing. And I talked about that a little bit. And if you want to hear that story, it was episode 29 where I shared more about that. Emotional eating is something I remember doing when my parents got divorced, when my dad was sick, when I was bullied, when I faced a breakup, when I was hurt, and I just didn't understand the right approach to take care of my emotions. And I didn't really know what I was doing to myself, but it wasn't a good thing. The damage was really being done. So when Amber Romaniuk and I had a conversation, and we decided that we had a lot in common. We wanted to share on each other's podcasts. It was a no-brainer. And the conversation got pretty heavy. And she's not sugarcoating her journey by any means. And when I say that this emotional eating, mindset, gut and hormone expert is not sugarcoating, I mean it. And you're about to find out why. You're going to find out more during our chat, because we dive into how to be your true self, how to embrace your journey, not just on the physical and the emotional level, but the spiritual and the energetic one as well. And Amber shares her own struggles, and she tells us more about self-sabotage and how she was feeding her feelings, but how she was able to turn that around and find her own body freedom. And you're going to benefit from this because she's going to show you how you can do it too. And it is definitely a story that's worth sticking around for. Plus, she shares some tools that she uses and the process that she used to heal and help herself find her way. So she's going to also, she shares a little more about how you can really be part of the healing process, where you can take her emotional eating quiz, find out where you are on the scale, and even get some personal help from her just from tuning in to this episode on Holistically Speaking. So it is time to take back the control. That's where we're going. And it starts right now, my friend. I have found such joy in meeting new people through this digital age. You and I, Amber, we met during a roundtable group, and it was like instant sisterhood. Love that, you know?
Agreed.
And, you talk about some really personal stuff and talking about emotional eating, talking about hormone health and the things that women really need to start thinking about, not even when they're at that point of perimenopause and menopause, but really this is a journey that we're on, especially with emotional eating, that could really date back to when we were just in our teens. So I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you for joining me on Holistically Speaking. I know you're going to provide such value, but I just would love for you to share your story.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And yeah, this journey has been a journey for me. So I had a couple of really life-changing moments that happened growing up that I think really shaped the self-sabotage I went through with food. And the first one, and I think we all have some kind of childhood experience where we become insecure with our bodies, or we, start to form that relationship with food. And for me, I was 5 and it was my first day taking the bus to school. And I get on the bus, I'm so excited to make new friends. And all that happens is I get on and the older boys look at me and go, look at her, she's ugly, she's fat. And the whole bus laughs. And I took that on. And when you're 5 and you don't know how to brush off a comment, like I took that to such like a deep place inside of me. And I took that identity on for the next 20 years of my life. And so food became a huge part of just soothing, enjoyment, right? And growing up with my mom who had, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis before I was born. And so I think there was a lot of guilt there from her around certain things that we couldn't do just because her symptoms would really flare up. And so I think for her, a way to compensate was food, right? So everything we did, there was so much food and there was always lots of sweets and treats and junk food in the house. And when I was healing my self-sabotage with food, I learned she had a food addiction. And just from seeing how she was with food and hiding wrappers and just, witnessing her binge eating and things like that. And so I'm like, okay, there is some inheritance there upon observing her patterns and behaviors. But so growing up, right, food was a friend. Food always tasted good. It was always there. And then, of course, you hit your preteens and teens and you start reading magazines and watching Hollywood and music videos. And you're like, how come I don't look like Britney Spears? Why is my stomach not that flat? There must be something wrong with me. And in order to have success, love, money, etc., I must need to have that body. And so then come the diets, the restriction, the self-criticism, the comparison. And then by my early 20s, I was, in my first breakup and really hurt and restricting and starving essentially and losing weight really fast and going to the gym 2 hours a day and couldn't attain it. And so it really flipped this switch into the binges. And then I gained 70 pounds in 4 months, just wanted to hide at home, right? The shame and embarrassment that comes with falling into binge eating, food addiction, emotional eating, whatever's going on, plus the weight gain. It was just such a debilitating time frame, being 22 and having really low self-worth. And so for me, binges weren't just sitting and eating half of a chocolate bar. It was literally eating until I was so full I was sick. And there was a period of time where I did binge and purge because you think, oh, I'll just get rid of it and then it won't do anything. But that, of course, does more harm, right, than just the binging. And so people always say, well, okay, this happened, this was happening, like you're in pain, you're bloated, you're gaining weight, you're isolating at home because you don't want to go out and see your friends. Like, what changed this? Like, how did you start to deal with this? Because I wasn't really aware of what I was doing for a while until I started doing a bit of reading and like, okay, I think I am binge eating. Like I don't have control. I'm losing control. I can't stop. And then I'm just so uncomfortably full and feeling sick. And so I realized, wow, I'm binge eating. I have a food addiction. I'm literally obsessed with food. I can't stop thinking about it, to whether it's diets, restriction, controlling, or losing control. And I really started to become worried for my life because it was happening almost every night. It wasn't just here or there. And to be that destructive on your body and then to try and go to the gym and compensate and be exercising and then not eating half the day, like I was doing a number on all parts of my body, right? And my mental health. And I think we get into this place where there's a bit of a denial of like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, food's my friend. I don't know what I would do without food being such a huge part of my identity, and weight focus and the scale and numbers and chasing calorie numbers and clothing sizes. And so it's like my ego, my negative voice mindset, like convinced me like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Like, don't change. It's going to be too hard to change. Just try harder. Just have more willpower. So I feel like we get into this place where we fear the change. We don't want to step outside of this comfort zone, even though we're suffering, because it's familiar, and the unfamiliar is scary. And so I let this fear keep me stuck in this place until I had my low point moment, which was the night where I was finished a binge, and I always threw the food in the garbage because I thought if I throw it in the garbage, I'm not going to go and dig through the garbage and eat it. But that night I did. So I had finished the binge. I was laying on the couch, just crying, just so upset, right? Like, what's going to happen to me? Why is this my life? Why is this going on? And, you know, my food settled. I'm like, oh, I could go for another cookie if this is the last time I'm going to do this. And so I went into the kitchen, pulled out my garbage, pulled out the food and ate it, and just felt absolutely embarrassed and just, you know, started crying on the floor and just thought like, how is this my life? How am I sitting here on my apartment kitchen floor eating out of a garbage? Like, I never could have imagined that this was going to be my life.
Well, you know, you and I both know, working in the field where we're helping others, that the first step to any change is an awareness, right? And sitting there, and first it's that feeling of just, what the hell, right? And then it's that thought of, you're either going to continue doing it and keep spiraling, or you're going to say, I'm done. So for you, what was that done moment where you're like, this is it?
Yeah, it really was that. And what happened in that moment was this comfort zone of familiarity got shattered. The fear of change got shattered because the suffering in that moment was so big that I was like, I can't keep tolerating this level of suffering, isolation, hurt to my body. I don't know what the journey is going to look like. I don't know anything about this, but I know that I can't keep doing this. And it really catapulted me to go like, I need to start figuring out why I'm doing this, what this is, why it's happening, because I'm not willing to have this do me in, and or I'm not willing to have this destroy my life. And so I think that that's really what it was, is the suffering shattered the fear of taking steps to deal with it. And so I didn't really get any help. I didn't really have money at the time. I did go and see like a psychologist once, and I have all the utmost respect for every kind of healthcare practitioner, but I went and poured my heart out, and she was like, just stop doing it. Just don't drive to the store. And I was like, that triggered me to go and binge. And I'm like, I just wasted the only $300 I had in my bank account. And that's really, that's it. And so I was like, okay, I think I, for whatever reason, need to figure this out on my own.
That's a hard thing to hear, to figure it out on your own. Because honestly, we need support in this area. It's why we do what we do, right?
Yes.
But sometimes you have to break up with your therapist because they're not the right kind of therapist.
Yeah. And
or a coach or practitioner or whatever.
Yeah. And everyone has that alignment, and some people aren't in alignment. So it was like I had this invisible nudge that's just like, don't worry, you're going to figure it out. And I'm like, okay, like I'm listening, I'm going to go. And so it's like I started learning about sugar. Sugar was the first thing I learned about. And it started to blow my mind. I'm like, what? Sugar is 10 times more addictive than cocaine? Boom, blew my mind. Wow. Like, no wonder I keep losing control. It's not just me. It's not like that I'm crazy. Like, there's things being put into our food to make us addicted or give us cravings and throw our blood sugar out of whack. And then I started learning about gut health and how I had all this unhealthy candida, and that was giving me cravings and bloating and all this stuff. And so I started to change the way that I ate, and less processed food, and I started to feel better. But then it's when I wanted to keep binging on like nuts or nut butter and like a whole jar of peanut butter and bananas. I'm like, there is something deeper here. And then it was like, wow, okay, next level. I don't love myself. I have this void I'm trying to fill with food. I don't know what worthiness is. I have no healthy ways to cope with stress. I suck at dealing with stress. I'm afraid to feel my emotions, and I don't know what's triggering me. So then I embarked on like the emotional leg of the journey, which was, I'm going to start writing my triggers down after they happen. I'm going to put this list in every room of my apartment so that I can remind myself when I'm triggered. I started getting into self-care, meditation, tapping, breath, like going to yoga, getting out into nature, I started to, muster up the courage to sit and feel my feelings when I was, had fear or worry or anything, because I literally thought feeling was going to cause the world to end, and it didn't, right? So all these little things, as you build this courage and you take these steps to process through your emotions. And every time I could catch a trigger and not go to the store, it was a huge win, and it helped me build confidence. So as I went through that process, I really stopped the binge eating. And then it was more like, okay, wow, my hormones and gut health are a disaster. My blood sugar is a disaster, right? Like my body's hanging on to all this weight because of everything I put her through. And so then I went through the journey over the next couple of years of like balancing all of that and learning a lot about my hormone health, and like that my thyroid was off and my cortisol was 10 times higher than it should have been. And I had estrogen dominance, and right, all the bloating and pain, and my digestion was just sensitive no matter what I ate. So there's a lot of healing to do there.
And that's a whole nother side of things, because the hormone health, especially as we get older, dealing with the perimenopause or the menopause. I mean, I felt that like the first time I started going into perimenopause, I was like, what is going on with my body? It's like bipolar, you know? And that's not even dealing with an eating disorder. That's just fact of what your body deals with. Now, I will say, and I'm sure you can speak to this being a hormone expert and someone who's been doing this a while, that you start eliminating those toxic foods, or as we say in integrative nutrition, if it's made by people in white coats, you're likely going to see people in white coats. The more things that are processed, the more sugar, the more things that are addictive that cause you to do more, the more you're like throwing your gut health off, you're probably going to have a harder time with perimenopause or menopause. And for the guys out there, they deal with stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it is it fuels inflammation, and the more inflammation in the body, the more of a stress response the body's in. The cortisol spikes up, inflammation suppresses the thyroid, and then we end up with that hypothyroid, and then it's right. And then all of that impacts your estrogen levels, your progesterone, your testosterone levels. And it just amplifies going through that phase of life, whether it's menopause, perimenopause, PMS symptoms, fertility issues. I would say 100% of the women I work with have hormone imbalances, and it's usually high cortisol, underactive thyroid, low progesterone, and then the estrogen is either 50-50. 50% is too low, 50% is too high. And when we have this kind of picture going on, and this was a frustration for me because I stopped binge eating, I'm still gaining weight. What the heck is going on? But I had this limiting belief of I need to keep exercising 5 days a week, because if I don't, I'm not going to lose weight, or I'm going to, keep gaining. So the irony is my hormones are a mess. I'm pushing my body too hard. And then I'm like, maybe I need to stop the gym for a while. Like maybe I need to rest. And my ego's like, no, you can't do that. Like you're going to gain even more weight. I'm like, well, I'm gaining weight already. I might as well just give it a shot and pause. And that was a game changer for me, because being my cortisol was so high, I was just continuing to keep everything else out of balance in my nervous system. And so slowing down and resting helped my hormones regulate so well. And I tell you, the weight just came off. And that's why I always say to women, like, I know it's frustrating to hang on to the weight, but the weight is like a teacher and trying to show you like things that are out of balance in the mind, the body, the soul. Like, are you willing to look at that? Right? Because eating less and exercising more isn't the answer.
Oh, it's such a misconception too. We hear it all the time. I was just talking to my trainer about it yesterday. Even people have that misconception of if you lift heavier, you're going to bulk up. No, if you eat more bad foods, things that aren't nourishing your body, then you're going to bulk, because it's that. And the same thing with the people that are like addicted to exercise. Mm-hmm. This is not making you healthy. No. Your body, as we've heard, your body keeps the score, right? Yeah. So this is a really great place to stop, because I just want to let folks know, those who are tuning in, that Amber has graciously offered to share a 30-minute call to find out more about emotional eating or hormone support, whatever you need. But also you have this quiz, right? You have this quiz that you can download and find out if you are an emotional eater, or where you fall on that, where you fall on that in the emotional eating, right?
Yeah. It's great. You take the quiz, and then it kind of indicates kind of where you're at. And then you get some really great resources and things to access if you so choose. And it's kind of nice to see it and to see where you're at. It's sometimes just seeing a number and a rating helps us kind of go, oh, okay, maybe this is going on for me, or, oh, maybe, yeah, okay, good, this isn't going on for me, right? And then you can take the steps that you feel called to.
Wonderful. And listen, if you find that this podcast is touch moving and inspiring you, this episode with Amber, or you know somebody who might need that support, maybe pass along that quiz to them, listen to the episode, pass the episode along, and then set up that 30-minute call. I mean, this is a really way that we can support each other. So this isn't just about you listening, you tuning in. This is about how can you touch, move, and inspire others and pay it forward. So just want to put that out there to those who are tuning in, however you're listening, wherever you're listening, that you could do that. Amber, let's get into, one thing I want to talk to you about is how you got into the modalities that you work in. I know you mentioned EFT, as a Havening Techniques practitioner working in another area of psychosensory modalities. How has EFT worked for you? And if those who aren't familiar, that's tapping. So
yeah, it is my favorite tool. I found it like 13 years ago and I was blown away by how much it helped me release so many of the suppressed emotions from the binging and not knowing how to feel and express, how calm I would feel afterward, right? That I could, I was fascinated by the fact that not only does tapping help regulate your nervous system and help your amygdala feel safe, but the fact that it helps like clear all these negative thoughts and limiting beliefs out of your subconscious mind and your cells, and your cellular memory was just like, this is incredible. And I think I love like the technique that I use, like you go into negative first and you acknowledge the negative and then go into the positive affirmation. And I just love that because I think that one thing that so many of us struggle with when we're embarking on this journey is we don't feel worthy. We don't love ourselves. We don't, all those positive affirmations, like that doesn't even feel real. I feel like a fraud saying that. And so to start practicing, like tapping it in feels like it ingrains it on a deeper level. So EFT to me is just such a game-changing tool to help you release, let go, and bring in more of what you want. And it's also so good for balancing your cortisol levels. So I love it for that too.
That's great. I love hearing that. And, I call these little tools that we put in our toolbox, I call them brain candy that you put in your brain candy jar, that we use these sweet little tools anytime we want. So whether it's tapping, whether it's havening, whether it's taking a walk or going for yoga, the beauty of the work that you're doing with tapping and also I do with havening is that these are neuroscience-based approaches. These are helping you change your thoughts, moods, behaviors. And some people might gravitate to one or gravitate to the other. But the thing is, there's nothing wrong with having more tools to access when you need it. Yeah. And to know that there are tools that can help you self-regulate and self-apply so that when you don't have access to your coach or your practitioner or your doctor or your therapist, you're self-empowering yourself by being able to practice these modalities on yourself and let you know that the true power is in your own hands,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the thing is when you start to use these tools and you start to heal and, you start to like overcome the self-sabotage and your energy levels improve or, you know how to navigate a stressful situation, your confidence grows. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can do this. You start believing in yourself. And to me, that's everything.
So you've been on this journey for a while. And the one question I want to ask you is, I guess this kind of goes in alignment with my own journey as well. I mean, those of us who are practitioners and coaches, we've likely been through something ourselves, which is why we want to hold space for others to help them, to maybe help them avoid going through it without the tools we didn't have, right? And having to not do so much of the work. And basically it's like be somebody else's survival guide in a way, So how has it been for you to show up for others?
Oh, it's just been the most incredible and humbling experience because I was really nervous to share my story at first. I'm like, oh my gosh, people are going to judge me. What are people going to think? And I was just met with a flood of, I'm going through this too. I went through that too. Thank you so much for sharing. Like, I'm not the only one. And I think sharing the story to let others know you're not alone. Try not to feel so much shame and embarrassment around this. If I can heal, you can do it too. Like, here's the proof. And like holding the safe space, because I've had a lot of conversations with women who have had unfortunate experiences where they've been judged, pushed, forced into being told to do certain things that they don't want to do. And then that makes them want to shut down and not open up and go on the journey. And so I think it's just such a humbling experience to hold a safe, gentle space for women, because this is a very vulnerable, your health, self-sabotage with food, body image stuff, like your insecurities is a very vulnerable subject. And so being able to shine the light and give women hope. I'm so grateful for it because it helps them want to, make the change. And I just think that that's everything.
And you talked about it. I just actually had this conversation last night with my wealth manager, my advisor, and we were discussing how the two most vulnerable things to talk about are your health and your finances, right? Yep. It really is. And we have our financial wealth and then we have our personal wealth, right? And this is all part of that holistic approach to living, right? But we have to get comfortable in the uncomfortable to be able to stand in the tension, to be able to say this isn't working or this is working. And so regardless of what you're doing or how you're doing it, it's showing up for others and saying, hey, I struggled too, or I've struggled too, Yeah. And another area you're showing up for folks, and this is something we talked about a lot because this is part of the roundtable that we were both in, is having a podcast, being able to hold space for others in that way, to tune in. You have a podcast called the No Sugar Coating Podcast. I love that name, by the way, because it's such a play on words, right? And what is it that your biggest takeaway is? What do you want people to take away from tuning into the show?
That they're not alone, truly, and awareness. You build awareness. It's the first step to making the change.
Yeah. Yeah. And how long have you been doing the podcast now?
It's almost 7.5 years.
Oh my gosh. I did not realize that you've been doing it that long.
Yeah.
So how have you seen it change and grow, especially starting before the pandemic and continuing through?
Yeah. So I feel like it was I first had a podcast co-host, and then unfortunately it so happened that she took our show and locked me out and I had to start over. But that's okay. Everything happens for a reason. And
there you go.
I'm actually was really happy to go solo. The universe always makes everything work out, because I really wanted to go deeper into the emotional eating, binge eating mindset pieces. And so it's just been a steady growth. I do an episode a week. Sometimes I'll do a bonus episode midweek. And you know what? I really noticed it really started to grow. Like I doubled my downloads, almost tripled my downloads last year after I started talking more about the spiritual aspect of my journey. I was kind of nervous to do that at first because, some people are like, oh, that's woo and that's weird. I'm like, no, I just fully need to be me on the show. And as that self-expression fully came through, I was like, what?
And what do you mean by the spiritual aspect? Like, what is it you're sharing that you weren't sharing before?
Yeah. So I think sharing more about intuition, being an empath, being sensitive to energy, how to manage energy, like past life healings that I was going through that were helping me on my journey, your vibration, your frequency, and how self-sabotage is lowering that, and really like bringing all of that together. And also talking about ascension, which the planet is going through an ascension right now. And so bringing all of that together and tying it into these other experiences, that women are going through with their health, it really, because most of my listeners are like, wow, I'm this too. I feel this way too. Right. And of course you're a mirror, and you're energetically tied to your business and your podcast. So if I'm holding back, like obviously the energy is going to be somewhat stagnant in the podcast. So once I cleared that out, it just,
I love that.
Even more.
And that goes back to kind of how we met again, because we met through our friend Jennifer, who has she's a Akashic Records. She's been a guest on my show. Yeah. Has she been a guest on your show yet?
She's coming.
Good. And I'm excited to be a guest on your show as well. That's the beauty of like connecting, collaborating, creating, is that we have this ability to really connect. And she's got the podcast connector now too, which is really great. But the whole idea of spirituality is so important. And I think it's just getting more comfortable, again, going back comfortable in the uncomfortable, talking about how are you connected. It doesn't have to be religious. We all have the spiritual aspect to us, and letting others know that, being empathetic and being an empath just means that you might be processing things differently. But yeah, we're all energy. And by the way, even modern medicine and science is energy. We're talking about EFT and even havening, that it is electrochemical medicine, not energy medicine, called that, but it really is energy medicine, because everything's moving, and in movement is energy. So if people look at it more that way, maybe it's going to be a little bit more receptive in a positive way when we realize the frequency, the energy does matter with how you put it out in the world. And I agree with getting that message out there. So are those episodes more just you rather than having the guest come on? Are those your one-on-one talks with folks?
Yeah, I don't do a lot of guesting. I maybe have one guest episode a month. So
Well, I'm honored.
The majority is me. Yeah, of course. The majority is me
Yeah.
sharing these stories, experiences, learnings. So yeah. And with guests, it's a wide array. It's holistic health, it's hormone health, it's business, it's money, it's energy, it's ascension. It's like a blend of everything so that everyone can get a taste of all these different modalities. So,
and I would have to agree with you that sometimes when I do the solo episodes, because I'm more conversations, coming from the broadcasting background before I even got into working in health and wellness as a practitioner, I'm so used to interviewing, and that's just a comfortable space for me. But I will say the episodes that I do alone are very intimate. And I think that's when you can really connect with the listener, or if someone's tuning in, watching on YouTube, So there's an element where you feel like you're in the room with the folks that are tuning in. And I certainly love that feeling. I love knowing that as well. So I'm sure that's where you're seeing this big spike, because people feel like you're talking with them, not to them.
100%.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to being on the show. Thank you so much for the invitation. That's the No Sugar Coating podcast. And I know we need to wrap it up, but I do want to remind folks that Amber is graciously sharing her emotional eating quiz. I'm going to have a link to that in the listen notes, as well as an opportunity to have a 30-minute chit chat with her about where you're struggling and how she can support you on that journey. So thank you for doing that as well. But before we go, let's play a little game. All right. Okay. I do a little something called, I do a rapid fire, and I've been taking notes. That's why I look down, and I don't want you to think I'm not paying attention, but I take notes on what you're saying. And I want you to share one word with me from a word that I share with you. So a little word association. Okay. Just like real quick, what's on the top of Amber's mind? Okay. You ready? Y'all, I wish you could see some of the looks I get. If you're not watching this on YouTube, the reactions I get is almost like I'm giving you a pop quiz and I'm your professor. It's quite adorable. Okay, here we go. The first word, addiction.
Sabotage.
Oh, that's interesting. My second word is two-part, self-sabotage.
Oh, goodness. Hurt.
Binging.
Downward spiral. That's 2 words.
That's okay. Shame.
Guilt.
Food.
Friend.
Body image.
Love.
Hormones.
Balance.
Ascension.
Safe.
Spirituality.
Aligned.
Energy.
Connected.
Tapping.
Love.
Sugar coating.
Fun.
Yay! That was great. You were quick.
That's
you were
cool.
good.
Oh, thank
awesome.
you.
Well, it's just like getting the brain to work in a different way so that you're thinking about it without thinking about it, right? And then maybe processing things a little differently. So, Amber, it's been a joy having you. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I'll share everything in the listen notes, but I just want to hold space for you to share any final thoughts that you want to leave folks with.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I think, like I said earlier, you're not alone. Try to push the shame and the guilt to the side if this is what you're going through. Know that you can, break free of these things and create food and body freedom, and know that going on this journey is a teacher and is going to help take you to stepping fully into the man or woman you've always dreamed of being. And I think that that's a big gift to give yourself.
Love that. Beautiful way to close this. Thank you so much. Do not waste any time grabbing Amber's emotional eating quiz and that complimentary 30-minute call. And listen, if you know somebody else that might benefit from this, definitely pay it forward and pass it along. If anyone is struggling, if it is you that is struggling, this will help you on that road to freedom. And don't forget to give Amber's podcast, No Sugar Coating Podcast, a listen. It is full of insight. It will inspire you and help you every day. She's been at it a while, so I imagine there's something in there that you can learn from, and I hope you'll give it a listen. And if you're new to Holistically Speaking, if you're just tuning in for the first time, thank you so much for joining me. If you have been a part of the Thrive Hive for a while, and this is the 127th episode you've listened to, thank you for being part of the ride. Consider leaving a rating and review. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever your earbuds take you, so I know that I'm doing a good job over here. Holistically Speaking is edited by Two Market Media with music by my friend Lipbone Redding, and of course, listened to by you. I could not do this without you. And before I let you go, I want you to remember something. You're beautiful. just the way you are. I want you to give yourself the space and the grace to embrace all parts of yourself and be kind to your mind and body, because it really is the only temple that you have. Never forget that I love you, I believe in you, and be well.